my ex-boyfriend brought his new girlfriend to my apartment complex pool and announced loudly, "I upgraded big time, no regrets whatsoever about leaving her." I waved politely from my lounge chair without any reaction. What he couldn't see from where he was standing splashing around changed everything for him exactly 7 days later when the notice arrived at his apartment door. My divorce lawyer slid the papers across her desk with a knowing smile. "Trust me on this, Rachel. Take the property shares instead of the cash payout." I was exhausted from a year of court battles and just wanted it over with. But something in her eyes made me listen. "Property shares?" I leaned forward, squinting at the documents. My vision had gotten blurry from too many late nights crying. "Your ex-husband's business partner owns several rental properties. Instead of liquidating everything for cash, you can take a 10% stake in 3 buildings." She tapped her pen on the settlement agreement. "Including Riverside Apartments." My stomach dropped. "That's where I live." "Exactly." Her smile widened. "And where your monthly rent just became a business expense you're partially paying yourself. Plus, you get voting rights on all major property decisions." I stared at the numbers. It wasn't huge money. Nothing that would make me rich. But it was real. Tangible. Something I could build on. "What if I need cash right away?" "You can sell the shares later if you want. But Rachel, you've worked at that law firm for 12 years. You know how real estate works. This is smarter long-term." I signed the papers with a shaking hand. 3 weeks later, the divorce was final. I was single at 38, living in a 1-bedroom apartment I now partially owned, starting completely over. That's when Derek showed up. He lived 3 floors above me in Building C. We met at the mailboxes on a Tuesday morning. He was charming, sympathetic about my divorce, easy to talk to. We started having coffee together. Then dinner. Within 2 months we were dating. For 2 years, Derek seemed like proof that life could get better after disaster. He worked in sales, always had interesting stories, made me laugh. He said I was strong for surviving my divorce. Said I deserved happiness. Then he met Madison at a networking event. The change was gradual. He started mentioning her name. Comparing us. "Madison's really driven, you know? She's always working on some new project." I worked full-time too. But apparently that didn't count. 6 weeks later he broke up with me in the parking lot. "I need someone more ambitious. Someone who matches my energy." I cried in my car for an hour. Then I went upstairs and started picking up the pieces again. The pool area at Riverside Apartments was my refuge. I went there every Saturday morning with a book and my coffee, claiming the same lounge chair in the corner. It was quiet early in the day. Peaceful. Until Derek showed up with Madison. I heard his voice first. Loud, projecting across the water. "I upgraded big time, no regrets whatsoever about leaving her." My entire body went cold. I looked up slowly. Derek stood in the shallow end, arm draped around Madison's shoulders. She was younger than me, maybe 28, with perfect hair and a confident smile. They were both staring in my direction. He wanted me to see this. Wanted me to know he'd moved on. Wanted me to feel small and replaced and pathetic. Everyone around the pool had gone quiet. Neighbors I'd known for years were watching, waiting to see how I'd react. I set down my book carefully, took off my sunglasses, made eye contact with Derek across the shimmering water. Then I waved. A small, polite wave. Like he was just another neighbor saying hello. His face shifted. Confusion flickered across his expression. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. He'd wanted tears. Bigger. Drama he could recount later to make himself look good. I gave him nothing. Madison whispered something in his ear. He laughed too loud, pulling her closer, trying to recover his performance. I put my sunglasses back on and returned to my book. My hands were shaking so badly the words blurred. But I didn't let him see that. From my lounge chair I could see his 3rd-floor balcony. The oversized sectional sofa blocking half the space. The commercial-grade grill that definitely violated fire codes. The string lights he'd hung without permission. I'd noticed those violations months ago. Back when I loved him and looked the other way. Back when I thought his rule-breaking was charming and spontaneous instead of selfish and careless. But I wasn't looking the other way anymore. Derek and Madison stayed at the pool for another hour. His voice carried every few minutes, making sure I heard how happy he was. How perfect his new relationship was. How much better his life had become. I finished 2 chapters of my book and headed inside. The investor meeting was in 6 days. Monday morning I found an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Just my name written in careful handwriting. Inside were 12 pages of printed documentation. Property violation reports. All from the same unit. Building C, apartment 304. Derek's place. A sticky note was attached to the first page. I've been keeping records. Thought you should know. Gloria. Gloria Martinez had been the property manager at Riverside for 15 years. She was in her mid-50s, no nonsense, with salt and pepper hair always pulled into a tight bun. I'd spoken to her a few times about maintenance issues but didn't know her well. I spread the papers across my kitchen table and started reading. Noise complaints dating back 8 months. Fire code violations from balcony inspections. Unauthorized modifications to the unit. Guest parking abuse. 3 reports of late-night parties disturbing other residents. Everything was documented. Dates, times, photographs, written statements from neighbors. Derek had been breaking rules since he moved in. And no one had stopped him. I showed up at Gloria's office that afternoon with the folder. She looked up from her computer, unsurprised to see me. "You got my package." "Why now?" I sat down without being invited. "Why give this to me?" Gloria leaned back in her chair. "Because I just got the updated investor list. Saw your name. Realized you might actually care." "About Derek specifically?" "About the rules." Her expression was tired. "I've been trying to enforce these policies for years. Corporate keeps overruling me. They don't want to deal with difficult residents. Don't want potential lawsuits or vacancies. So people like your ex get away with whatever they want." "People like him?" "Charmers. Smooth talkers. The ones who know exactly what to say to get out of consequences." She gestured at the folder. "I've sent violation notices. He apologizes, promises to fix things, then does it again the next weekend. His parents co-signed the lease so management won't push too hard. Don't want to lose reliable rent payments." "His parents pay his rent?" Gloria nodded. "Most of it. He covers maybe 30%. They send a check every month." That explained a lot. The expensive car. The constant going out. The arrogance. Derek wasn't successful. He was subsidized. "What can I do?" I asked. Gloria's eyes met mine. "You're an investor now. You have voting rights. The other investors are tired of complaints and vacancies caused by problem residents. If you propose stricter enforcement policies at the next meeting, they'll listen." "When's the next meeting?" "Friday. 4 o'clock. Conference room at the main office." She paused. "I'll be there to present current issues and answer questions. I can't tell them which residents are causing problems, privacy regulations. But if someone proposes policy changes, I can implement them immediately." I looked down at the documentation in my hands. 12 pages of Derek's violations. Proof of everything he'd gotten away with. "I'll be there," I said. I spent 3 nights preparing for that meeting. Research consumed my evenings. I read property management guides, reviewed Arizona landlord-tenant laws, studied enforcement policies from similar complexes. My divorce had taught me one crucial lesson. Documentation and legality were everything. Emotions didn't matter in official proceedings. Only facts. Only what could be proven. I drafted a proposal. 5 new policies, each one addressing a specific problem. Each one completely legal and enforceable. Policy 1, 3-strike noise ordinance. First violation resulted in a written warning. Second meant a $150 fine. Third triggered lease termination proceedings. Policy 2, mandatory balcony safety inspections every 6 months. Fire code compliance was non-negotiable. Residents had 30 days to fix violations or face fines. Policy 3, ban on oversized furniture that blocked fire escapes or created safety hazards. Professional removal at resident expense if not corrected within 2 weeks. Policy 4, increased guest parking fees and 3-hour maximum stays without overnight permits. Unauthorized vehicles would be towed. Policy 5, annual lease compliance reviews for all residents with multiple violations. None of these policies mentioned Derek specifically. They applied to everyone. But I knew exactly who would be impacted most. Thursday night I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the meeting. The other investors asking questions I couldn't answer. Them voting against my proposals. Derek continuing his life unchanged while I looked foolish and vindictive. My phone buzzed at 11. A text from my sister Jennifer. Stop overthinking. You're doing the right thing. I hadn't told her about the meeting. But Jennifer always knew when I was spiraling. What if they say no? I typed back. Then you tried. That's more than you did with Derek for 2 years. He was right. For 2 years I'd watched Derek break rules and ignored it. Told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself love meant accepting someone's flaws. But there was a difference between accepting flaws and enabling bad behavior. I fell asleep with the proposal on my nightstand, alarm set for 6 a.m. The conference room at the main office was smaller than I expected. A rectangular table with 8 chairs. 4 were already occupied when I arrived at 3:55. 2 older couples I recognized from the complex. The Richardsons from Building A had been investors for 20 years. The Chens from Building B had owned their shares for a decade. They nodded politely when I sat down. Gloria stood at the front of the room with a laptop and projector. She gave me the smallest smile. At exactly 4 o'clock she began. Thank you all for coming. We have several items on today's agenda, but I want to start with current property issues. The screen behind her filled with statistics. Noise complaints up 40% over the last year. 3 fire code violations in the past 6 months. Parking disputes averaging 2 per week. Resident turnover at an all-time high. Mrs. Richardson frowned. This is unacceptable. We're losing good tenants because of these problems. Agreed, Mr. Chen said. What's being done? Gloria's expression remained neutral. Current policy allows for warnings and small fines, but enforcement has been inconsistent due to corporate oversight requirements. Unless we have clearer guidelines and stronger consequences, these issues will continue. Then we need clearer guidelines, Mrs. Richardson said sharply. Our property values are suffering. This was my moment. I cleared my throat. I have a proposal. Several policies that might address these issues. Everyone turned to look at me. The new investor. The divorced woman from Building C who'd only been on the list for 6 weeks. I've reviewed our current lease agreements and Arizona regulations, I continued, keeping my voice steady. Everything I'm suggesting is legal and commonly used in similar properties. I distributed copies of my proposal. Watched them read. Held my breath. Mr. Chen looked up first. This is thorough. Very thorough. The 3-strike policy makes sense, Mrs. Richardson added. People need consequences that actually matter. What about implementation? Mr. Richardson asked Gloria. Can you actually enforce this? Gloria nodded. With clear policies approved by the investors, yes. I can implement everything here within a week. I move to approve all 5 policies, Mrs. Chen said. Seconded. Her husband agreed. The vote was unanimous. I walked out of that meeting in a daze. It had taken less than 40 minutes. 5 policies approved. Enforcement starting immediately. Derek would get his first violation notice within 10 days. The music started at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Heavy bass that made my ceiling vibrate. Voices and laughter filtering down from Derek's apartment 3 floors above. I'd been expecting this. Derek threw parties every few weeks. Ignored his neighbors' complaints. Counted on his charm and his parents' money to smooth everything over. But things were different now. I waited until 10:30 when the noise ordinance officially kicked in. Then I called the non-emergency line and filed a complaint. Gave my apartment number. Described the disturbance. Stayed calm and factual. Gloria texted me an hour later. Violation notice will be delivered tomorrow morning. Thank you for the report. I fell asleep to the sound of Derek's party still going strong. But I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I watched from my balcony as Gloria personally delivered the notice to Derek's door. He answered in sweatpants, hair disheveled, clearly hungover. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his body language said everything. Confusion. Annoyance. Dismissal. He probably thought it was a mistake. A warning he could talk his way out of. Strike 1. 2 weeks later, the balcony inspection happened. I knew it was scheduled because Gloria had posted notices throughout the complex. Residents had 30 days to prepare. Derek didn't prepare. The inspector spent 15 minutes on his balcony. Took photographs. Made notes on a tablet. Shook his head. That afternoon, Derek received his second violation notice. Oversized furniture blocking the fire escape. Commercial grill in violation of building codes. Unauthorized electrical work for his string lights. He had 14 days to fix everything or pay $300 for professional removal and storage. I was checking my mail when Derek stormed into the lobby the next day. He marched straight to Gloria's office, violation notice crumpled in his fist. "This is ridiculous." His voice carried through her closed door. "I've had that furniture for a year. Nobody complained before." Gloria's response was too quiet to hear. But Derek's wasn't. "I want to know who's behind this. Someone has it out for me. This is harassment." I stood at the mailboxes sorting through junk mail, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to walk away. But another part needed to see this. Derek emerged from Gloria's office 5 minutes later, face red with frustration. He walked right past me without even glancing in my direction. I was invisible to him now. Just another neighbor he'd already forgotten. Strike 2. The third strike came 3 weeks later. Another party. Another noise complaint. Another violation notice. But this one came with consequences. Madison's white BMW was parked in guest parking that night. Had been there for 4 days straight without a permit. Under the new policies, guest vehicles couldn't stay more than 3 hours without overnight authorization. At 2 a.m. during Derek's party, her car was towed. I heard about it the next morning from Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door to Derek. She was at the mailboxes shaking her head. "That young man's girlfriend was screaming in the parking lot at 6 this morning," she said. "Her car got towed. $200 fee to get it back." She was furious. "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. "He threw another party last night. Third one this month. I can't sleep with all that noise." Mrs. Peterson sighed. "I'm glad management is finally doing something. I've complained for months." I nodded sympathetically and headed to work. But I couldn't stop thinking about Madison. About her face when she realized Derek's lifestyle came with actual consequences. When his charm couldn't fix everything with a smile and an apology. That evening I saw them arguing in the parking lot. Madison's voice was high and sharp. Derek's hands were up in a placating gesture. She got in her car and drove away. Tires squealing. She didn't come back that night. Or the next. A week later I saw Derek carrying boxes to his car alone. His movements were jerky, angry. He slammed the trunk hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. Mrs. Peterson appeared beside me again. I heard the girlfriend left him. Posted something on social media about too much drama and instability. Can't say I blame her. Neither could I. Derek had wanted someone ambitious. Someone who matched his energy. But Madison matched his reality instead. And didn't like what she found. The apartment complex had been quiet for 3 days. No parties. No loud music. Just peace. But Derek was still living above me. Still in violation of his lease. Still one more incident away from eviction proceedings. I wondered how long it would take. Gloria called me on a Thursday afternoon. "Can you come to my office? There's something you should know." My stomach dropped. Had Derek figured it out? Did he know I was behind the policy changes? I showed up at 5 when most residents were home from work. Gloria closed the door behind me and sat down heavily. "Derek's parents contacted me this morning." His parents. They co-signed his lease. They've been paying most of his rent. He pulled out a file. When the violation notices started arriving, Derek told them it was a misunderstanding. Building management making mistakes. He'd handle it. But he didn't handle it, I said. No. And when the third violation notice arrived, his parents asked to see the documentation. All of it. Gloria opened the file. I had to send them everything. The noise complaints. The inspection reports. Photographs of the violations. It's all part of the official record. She turned the file toward me. Inside were printed emails between Derek's parents and the management company. I read them slowly. Derek had told his parents he had a promotion at work. Told them he was making enough to cover rent on his own soon. Told them the apartment was an investment in his career, networking opportunities, professional image. All lies. His mother's email was devastating. We had no idea Derek was causing problems for other residents. We raised him better than this. We've been subsidizing a lifestyle he clearly can't afford and doesn't deserve. This stops now." His father's response was shorter. "Effective immediately, we're withdrawing our financial support. Derek is 32 years old. It's time he lived within his actual means." Gloria looked at me. "They're not renewing their co-signature. Derek has to move out or prove he can afford the rent on his own." "Can he?" "Not even close. His rent is $1,850 a month. His actual income barely covers $600. He's been living on their money and credit cards for years." I sat back in my chair processing this. My revenge had accidentally exposed Derek's lies to the people who mattered most. His own family. "What happens now?" I asked. "He has until the end of his lease to move out. 2 months. He already put in his notice this morning." Gloria paused. "I thought you should know. The policies you proposed didn't just enforce rules. They revealed who Derek really is." I left her office feeling strange. Vindicated but also oddly empty. This was what I'd wanted. Derek facing consequences. Derek losing his comfortable life. Derek forced to confront his own choices. But I hadn't expected it to feel so hollow. I saw Derek at the management office 2 weeks later. He was at the counter arguing about his deposit. I gave 60 days notice. I should get my full deposit back. Gloria's assistant, a young woman named Keisha, kept her voice professional. "Your deposit is being used to cover the furniture removal fees and the third violation fine. You have $150 remaining." "That's ridiculous. Those charges were bogus. The charges were outlined in your violation notices. You had opportunities to fix the issues yourself." Keisha slid a document across the counter. "Everything is itemized here." Derek grabbed the paper, face flushed. "I want to speak to whoever approved these new policies. This is targeted harassment. The policies were approved by the investors. I can't give you their names. Privacy regulations. Then I want to file a complaint against management." "You're welcome to do that. The form is on our website." I was standing at the mailboxes across the lobby, pretending to sort through envelopes. Derek hadn't noticed me yet. I could leave. Slip out the side door. Avoid this confrontation. But I stayed. Maybe I needed to see this up close. Needed to watch him lose control. Needed proof that my quiet revenge had worked. Derek slammed his hand on the counter. "This is unbelievable. I've lived here for 3 years. Never had problems until now. According to our records, you've had 12 documented violations over 18 months, Keisha said calmly. "The new policies simply enforce consequences for behavior that was always against your lease terms." Derek opened his mouth to argue but stopped. His eyes had drifted past Keisha. To the investor meeting schedule posted on the wall behind her. His face changed. Understanding flickered across his expression. He turned slowly, scanning the lobby. His gaze landed on me. For a moment neither of us moved. I held his stare. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. He couldn't prove anything. Couldn't know for certain. But he knew. "Rachel," he said. My name sounded like an accusation. I closed my mailbox and walked toward the door. Passed within 5 feet of him. Close enough to hear his breathing. Close enough to see the anger in his eyes. "Goodbye, Derek," I said quietly. Then I left. My hands were shaking when I reached my apartment. But I was smiling. Gloria showed up at my door that evening with 2 cups of coffee and a tired smile. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing me one. "Derek figured it out." "I know. I was there." I stepped aside to let her in. We sat on my small balcony watching the sunset paint the Phoenix sky orange and pink. For a while neither of us spoke. "I should tell you something," Gloria finally said. "I've wanted to enforce these rules for years. Long before you became an investor. You mentioned that. But it's more than that." She stared into her coffee. "I've been working in property management for 20 years. I've seen hundreds of directs. Charming men who think rules don't apply to them. Who use other people's money and patience until both run out. Why didn't corporate support you? Because directs don't usually cause enough damage to matter. They pay rent on time or their parents do. They smile and apologize when confronted. They're just annoying enough to bother neighbors but not destructive enough to warrant eviction. Gloria shook her head. Corporate cares about occupancy rates and avoiding lawsuits. Not about quality of life for other residents. But now you can enforce the rules. Biz, you gave me cover. The investors approved the policies. Corporate can't override that. She looked at me. You didn't just get revenge on Derek. You gave me the tools to protect every resident in this complex from people like him. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been focused on Derek. On making him pay for humiliating me. On proving he couldn't get away with treating people badly. The other residents have noticed, Gloria continued. Mrs. Peterson thanked me yesterday. Said she can finally sleep through the night. Mr. Kumar in Building A mentioned how much quieter the parking lot is. People are renewing their leases instead of leaving. That's good. It's more than good. It's what this place should have been all along. She finished her coffee and stood. I wanted you to know that. Your revenge helped more people than just you. After she left, I sat on the balcony until dark. Thinking about Derek. About Madison. About all the people affected by the policy changes I'd proposed. Revenge had felt personal. Intimate. Something between Derek and me. But it had become something bigger. Something that mattered to an entire community. And that felt more satisfying than I'd expected. 3 months after Derek moved out, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Rachel Morrison? A woman's voice. Young. Hesitant. Yes. Who's this? It's Madison. Derek's. I mean his ex-girlfriend. I almost hung up. Almost deleted the number and blocked it. But curiosity won. What do you want? I need advice. Legal advice. I know you work at a law firm. She paused. Derek borrowed $5,000 from me. Said it was for an investment opportunity. Something that would double our money in 6 months. Let me guess. The money disappeared. He stopped returning my calls 2 weeks ago. I found out he moved to Tempe. Some studio apartment. When I confronted him, he said the investment fell through and he can't pay me back. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I should have felt vindicated. Madison had called Derek an upgrade. Had laughed while he humiliated me at the pool. Had chosen him over basic human decency. But listening to her voice, young and scared and realizing she'd been used, I just felt tired. Do you have documentation? I asked. Text messages about the loan? Bank transfers? Everything. I kept all of it. Then you have a case. Small claims court. 5,000 is right at the limit, but it's doable. I grabbed a pen. I'll give you my divorce lawyer's number. She takes some cases pro bono, especially when women are being financially manipulated. Tell her I referred you. Why are you helping me? Madison asked quietly. I was awful to you. At the pool that day. I knew what Derek was doing. I thought it was funny. You were awful, I agreed. But Derek's worse. And you deserve to get your money back. I gave her the lawyer's information. Hung up. Stared at my phone. 20 minutes later my divorce lawyer called. Rachel Morrison. It's been a while. Catherine's voice was warm. I just got a very interesting call from a young woman you sent my way. Madison. Yeah. She told me about Derek. The loan. The pattern. Catherine paused. She also told me there were others. At least 2 other women he borrowed money from before her. She found them on social media comparing stories. My stomach turned. He's done this before? Multiple times. Small amounts. Usually between 3 and 7,000. Just under the limit where people might pursue legal action. But if Madison's willing to testify and if we can get the other women on board, we can establish a pattern of financial fraud. Will it work? In small claims? Absolutely. The court records will be public. His pattern of behavior will be documented. It won't send him to jail, but it'll follow him. Background checks. Credit reports. Future relationships. Catherine's voice hardened. Men like Derek count on shame keeping their victims quiet. When women start talking to each other, comparing notes, the whole system falls apart. 3 weeks later, Madison won her case. Derek was ordered to pay back the $5,000 in monthly installments. The other 2 women filed their own claims. The court records detailed everything. The loans. The lies. The pattern of using women financially and discarding them when they asked for accountability. I didn't attend the hearings. Didn't need to see Derek's face when the judgment came down. The court documents were enough. The apartment complex looked different 6 months after Derek left. Quieter. Calmer. Like a place where people actually wanted to live instead of just tolerating. I sat at the quarterly investor meeting, reviewing the financial reports. Occupancy was up 12%. Resident satisfaction surveys showed significant improvement. Maintenance requests were down because people were treating the property better. Mrs. Richardson smiled at me across the table. Your policies made a real difference, Rachel. Property values have increased. We're getting better quality tenants. Gloria deserves the credit, I said. She's the one enforcing everything. But you gave us the framework. The courage to actually set standards. Mr. Chin nodded. We should have done this years ago. After the meeting, Gloria walked me out. I heard about Derek's court case, she said. Madison and the others. Catherine's a good lawyer. She doesn't let people get away with things. Neither do you. Gloria stopped at my car. You've changed since your divorce, you know. Stronger. More confident. I had to. The alternative was staying broken. That's what I tell new residents now. When they complain about the rules being too strict. I tell them we're building a community where people treat each other with respect. Where actions have consequences. Where you can't charm your way out of responsibility. She smiled. One woman asked if we had a zero-tolerance policy for jerks. I said we're working on it. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised me. Driving home I thought about Derek. About the pool incident that had shattered my dignity. About the weeks of planning revenge. About the policies that had unraveled his entire life. The revenge had been satisfying. Watching him lose his apartment, his girlfriend, his parents' support, his reputation, all of it had felt like justice. But the real victory was quieter. It was Mrs. Peterson sleeping through the night. It was new residents choosing Riverside because it was well-managed and peaceful. It was Madison getting her money back and learning to spot manipulation. It was me sitting in investor meetings making financial decisions, building something stable. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Dinner this weekend? I want to hear about your latest investment ideas. I smiled and replied yes. Derek had called Madison an upgrade. Had announced it loudly enough for everyone to hear. Had wanted me to feel replaced and diminished and worthless. But I hadn't been downgraded. I'd been freed. Freed to become someone who didn't need his validation. Someone who built power quietly instead of announcing it. Someone who understood that real strength wasn't about public humiliation. It was about strategic thinking and long-term planning. Derek had moved to a studio in Tempe. Was working a job that barely covered his bills. Was dealing with court-ordered payments and a damaged reputation. I was building equity in 3 properties, learning about real estate investment, making friends with people like Gloria who valued competence over charm. The revenge had been the catalyst. But the transformation was the real story. 1 year after signing those divorce papers, I sat on my balcony with Catherine, my divorce lawyer who'd become a friend. You ever regret taking the property shares instead of cash? She asked, sipping wine. Never. Best decision I made. Even with all the Derek drama? Especially because of it. I watched the sunset. If I'd taken cash I would have spent it. Probably on therapy and ice cream and trying to feel better. But the properties forced me to think long-term. To see myself as someone who builds things instead of just surviving things. Catherine nodded. That's why I pushed you toward it. I knew you needed something solid. Something that would grow. The 10% stake is worth 20% more than it was last year. Property values keep rising. Because you and Gloria turned that place around. Fewer problem residents. Better maintenance. Actual community standards. She refilled our glasses. You should consider buying more property. You've learned the business. You have the eye for it. I'd been thinking about that. Looking at smaller buildings. Foreclosures I could renovate. Opportunities that a year ago would have terrified me. Maybe, I said. I'm not rushing anything. But yeah. Maybe. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it but something made me answer. Rachel Morrison? A man's voice. Older. Formal. Yes. This is Robert Chin. I'm one of the investors at Riverside Apartments. My wife and I have been very impressed with your contributions to the property. Thank you. We're looking to sell our shares in another property. Smaller building. 30 units. We're getting older and want to simplify our portfolio. We thought you might be interested before we list it publicly. I sat up straighter. I'm listening. He gave me the address, the asking price, the current occupancy rates and financial history. It was more than I had. But not impossibly more. With a loan and careful planning it was reachable. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course. We're not in a rush. But Rachel, you remind us of ourselves 40 years ago. Smart. Careful. Willing to do the work. We'd rather sell to someone we trust. After he hung up I stared at my phone. Catherine was grinning. You're going to do it, aren't you? I don't know. It's a big step. So was divorcing your husband. So was taking property shares instead of cash. So was standing up to Derek. She raised her glass. You keep taking big steps. They keep working out. That night I drove past the building Robertson had mentioned. It was older than Riverside. Needed work. But it had good bones. Thank you. Thought about Derek. About his announcement at the pool. About how certain he'd been that leaving me was an upgrade. He'd been wrong about so many things. Wrong about what made someone ambitious. Wrong about what gave life meaning. Wrong about how power actually worked. Real power wasn't announcing your victories. It was building them quietly. Strategically. With patience and planning and the willingness to do uncomfortable work. Derek was still paying off court judgments. Still living in a studio. Still bouncing between jobs and relationships that fell apart when people saw who he really was. I was considering buying my second property. Building relationships with investors who respected my judgment. Learning to trust myself again. The revenge had been sweet. Watching Derek's life unravel had satisfied something deep and hurt inside me. But the real victory was this. I didn't think about him anymore unless something specifically reminded me. He wasn't part of my daily life. Wasn't part of my plans or dreams or identity. He was just a lesson I'd learned. A chapter I'd closed. A mistake I wouldn't repeat. And that felt better than any revenge ever could. I bought the building. It took 3 months of negotiations, inspections, loan applications and sleepless nights. But I did it. 15% ownership in a 30-unit building that needed work but had incredible potential. Gloria agreed to consult on the renovation and management. Catherine helped with the legal paperwork. The Chens became mentors, teaching me things they'd learned over 40 years in real estate. My sister Jennifer came to the closing, bringing champagne. Look at you, she said, hugging me. Property mogul. Businesswoman. Badass. I own 15% of a building that needs new plumbing. Let's not get carried away. You own something. You're building something. You're not the person Derek left at that pool. She pulled back to look at me. You're better. He was right. The woman Derek had humiliated at the pool would have cried. Would have run. Would have spent months questioning what was wrong with her. The woman I'd become had documented violations, proposed policy changes, and quietly dismantled his entire comfortable life. But more than that, I'd built something new. Something that didn't depend on anyone else's validation or support. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I heard you bought a building. Congratulations. You always were smarter than you gave yourself credit for. Derek. I stared at the message. He'd heard about my purchase. Probably from mutual friends. Probably spent time composing that text to sound supportive and mature. Jennifer watched me. Is that him? Yeah. You going to respond? I thought about it. Thought about all the things I could say. All the ways I could twist the knife one more time. All the proof I could offer that I'd won and he'd lost. But I didn't need to. The revenge was complete. Not because Derek was suffering, though he was. Not because I'd destroyed his life, though I'd certainly disrupted it. The revenge was complete because I'd changed. Because I'd taken the pain he'd caused and transformed it into something productive. Because I'd learned that healing wasn't about making someone pay. It was about building something better. I deleted the message without responding. Let's go celebrate, I said to Jennifer. I have 15% of a building to renovate. We left my apartment, the one I partially owned in the complex where I'd helped establish Real community standards, and headed to dinner. Behind me, Derek's text vanished into digital nothing. Unanswered. Unimportant. Just like he'd become. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about becoming someone they could never diminish again. And I'd done exactly that. Rachel proved that the best revenge is becoming unbreakable. If her transformation inspired you, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories of women who turn pain into power. Comment below. Which moment made you say, "Yes, Rachel"? I read every single comment,